Yep. Okie dokie. So, let's have a look what we're going to do here. Can you all see that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so what I've done here, and you've got to realize this is my interpretation. All right. So please feel completely free to disagree with me anywhere along the line. But what I've done is I've looked at a whole range of different packages to see what's involved and what I think the pluses and minuses are and what the costs are and things like that. Okay. Yep. So let's start off by saying my definitions. And the first definition I've got is what I call photographer software. And for photographer software, I'm talking about things which are purely used for processing an image. So you're using your developed tools, which nearly all these packages have got. That's changing your exposure, your lighting, your color, your blacks, your whites, all those sort of things. It will have an element of cataloging in it. So you can actually catalog all your photos and trace them all. Most of them have got something which you can use for, well, let's face it, when it comes to digital photos, we all tend to take an awful lot more photos than we ever use. So you then got to go through and select the ones you want. And also a very important part of that I've always felt is keywording. So those are the sort of technical or main features of what I call photographer software. The other side is what I call image manipulation. And that's where you're starting to change images, you're building composites, you're manipulating the images, you're adding effects like blurring and twirling and distortion and reversing and things like that. You know, so it's the sort of thing that Justin can't live without, you know. But also taking into account that nearly all of these have got the development tools as well, or they've got certain tools, but they tend not to have the cataloging. Oh, Adam's joined along. I'll just wait for him to come in. It doesn't seem to have come. There he is. Hi, Adam. Nice to see you. Hi, Adam. Nice to see you.
See, how's it going? Sorry, I'm late.
That's all right. So, listen, I'd only just started, so don't worry about it. But thank you for coming. I was just saying this is my definition of the two types of software. So the photographer's software, which is basically the developing, the cataloging, all that sort of thing, and the manipulation software, which tends to contain some of the development tools. So, so here are the contenders. Firstly, what the people don't appreciate is there's an awful lot of free software out there. And interesting enough, Windows Photos and Mac Photos, particularly Mac Photos, are actually got a lot of features in there. Mac Photos has actually got an awful lot of developed tools. There's also the Canon and the Nikon studios, which are both free softwares. And there's also, I think, from Fuji and Olympus and one or two others. They've also got those. And there's another product called GIMP, which I don't know if anybody's heard of. Yeah. But GIMP is an open source image manipulation package, which can do virtually anything that Photoshop can do or Affinity can do, but it's completely free. But it doesn't have any of the developed software in it at all. It is purely an image manipulation package. And then you've got all the other packages. And that's just a selection. I mean, there's probably another 15 on top of that. There are so many out there now, that's just quite a joke, but I picked out what I think are the main ones. So Adobe Elements, you use Elements, don't you, David?
Yeah, I do indeed.
Yeah. Elements is regarded by many as like the most basic basic way of processing photos. It's got some great facilities in there. One of the great things about it is it's bloody easy to use.
Indeed.
And then you've got Lightroom and Photoshop. And you can get those separately, but of course you can also get what's known as the Adobe Photography Plan, which is Lightroom and Photoshop. Then there's Affinity Photo 2, which is very, very similar to Photoshop. in virtually all. It's got one or two facilities that Photoshop doesn't, but then Photoshop's got an awful lot of facilities that Affinity doesn't, but they've got, nothing's got everything. Luminar Neo, which is actually one of my absolute favorites. It's got some major drawbacks to it, unfortunately. One of it is quite slow, but it is unbelievably easy to use. I think somebody could pick up how to use Luminar Neo probably in about 2 or 3 minutes. And it does things that Photoshop and Lightroom would love to do and can't. So it's really good. Then there's ON1. ON1 is an incredibly clever package. It's got basically everything you would find in Lightroom and Photoshop, plus 1 or 2 other things which the others don't have. And of course, it has 1 or 2 things that the others don't, and so on and so forth.
John,
yeah.
I thought ON1 was free.
No, it most certainly is not.
Okay.
Only 100% sure.
Okay.
I know, because I had to pay for it. So, then there's DxO Photo Lab, which is and Capture 123. They're both very professional packages. They're very clever, very good at working with raw images, and very expensive to use, and really aimed at professional photographers. But they do have some good things in there, but they're great packages. Radiant Photo is a fairly new one that's come along. I don't understand why people are liking it. It doesn't do anything quite special. It's really only got the basic development aspects of it, plus some effects, and it's quite expensive for what it is, but people are buying it. And there's an old favorite, which a lot of people still use, Coral Paint Shop Pro, which is now very old and misses out an awful lot of things, but it's still usable, and that's it. There are others, of course, I'm not going to say there aren't, but these are the ones that tend to be the most popular. So photographers versus manipulations. So I say, firstly, you'll tend to get full development controls. So, if you look typically at Lightroom, or if you look at Adobe Camera Raw in Photoshop, or if you look at the develop module in Affinity, all right, they all got this aspect of having full develop controls. So you control the highlights, the lowlights, the shadows, the midtones, the blacks, the whites, and all the other things that come about that, the exposure, and so on and so forth. The thing that something like Affinity doesn't have and Photoshop doesn't have is the ability to actually select photos and catalog them. So, if you pick up, if you do go for, like we all went off to Crossness and you took 40 photos, you're not going to use 40 photos, you're going to actually get rid of some of them. So you need to go through and find a way, say, I want this one, I don't want that one, I want this one, I don't want that one. And that's what I mean by culling and selecting. Organizing is all to do with the cataloging aspect of it. Both Lightroom and OM1 and DxO are quite brilliant at cataloging. So you could actually don't ever need to use things like Windows Explorer or the Mac Finder to actually locate and move files about. You could do it all within the package, and it keeps a trace of everything, which is very, very handy way of doing those pictures. We all had a situation where you've taken a photo and you've worked on it and you put it in another folder somewhere and you can't remember where the hell you put it. But if you're using a proper photographer's package, it will keep a track of it for you, which is a very handy thing to do. Keywording is something I find tremendously useful, and a lot of people do. Whenever I import photos into my catalogs, I always keyword, and I keyword with, basically, so for example, we're off on a cruise to Spain and France a few months ago. So my first keyword was cruise 2022. So I can always go and find any of the pictures from that by just using those keywords. And then I catalog them by country, by location, just by putting in those keywords. So I can always find whatever pictures I want. So at any stage, I can go in and find all the pictures I've ever taken in Spain, whether it was on that holiday or a previous holiday, just because they've got the keyword in. And it makes it very helpful.
Can I ask a quick question? Do you have to label every picture though?
You don't have to keyword any of them.
No,
You know, but
to
if you
be-
don't keyword something, you'll never find it by a keyword.
Yeah, but you have to go through each picture and have given them a word.
No. I mean, you know, I mean, you're using Affinity, right? So you've got no cataloging at all, right? So I'm using Lightroom. When I import my photos into Lightroom, as I import them, I put the keywords in. So if I'm bringing in 200 photos, all of them will have the keywords.
Right.
Right. And I can add some in or take some out on individual photos as I wish.
But do you have to put your keywords into every individual photo?
Yeah,
You don't-
that's what I was.
No, you don't have to. No, if I'm
But if
using
you
Lightroom,
want to catalogue all 200 of them,
you just put it in once and it does all 200 of them.
right?
Like an album type scenario.
Yeah, that's right.
Ah, like a folder.
Yeah, but it's not a folder. It's just an indexing system where you can put in a search engine and say, find all my pictures that are in Spain. Okay, but yeah, if you're importing 200 photos, they're all in Spain. You put in Spain once, and it brings all 200 in with that keyword in.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Oh, that's quite good.
Oh, it's brilliant. It's, you know, because we all lose pictures, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Right. Now, one of the most important things for me is what's known as a non-destructive workflow. And most, in fact, nearly all the photographers packages offer a non-destructive workflow. And what I mean by that is your original picture, your original photograph never changes. All right. All the changes you make in a photographer's package, like Lightroom or Neo or OM1 or whatever, are done in a side file. All right. And attached to it. But your original image is always intact as you took it from your camera. So you can always go backwards, always go forwards, always discard everything, you know, and change it any way you like. And one of the other things that's important in this sort of package is what's known as virtual copies. All right. Now, what I mean by that is this. I take a photo and I give it a treatment. I boost the highlights, I knock down the shadows and that, and then I make it slightly warmer because it's a sunset and I like it. But I think, do you know what? It would look very good if I did something quite different to it. So I can take that photo and create a false version of it, a virtual copy. It's not an actual file. It's something just held in the package. And I can go back to the original and change it without having affected everything I've already done. So I can end up with 2 or 3 or 4 treatments of only one photo. And my original photo is still exactly the same as when I took it from the camera. So you've always got that protection of all those sort of things. So virtual copies and a non-destructive workflow is really important. I mean, you know, Jeanette, you use Photoshop a lot, and Sue, you're using Affinity. As you change a file, you save it, it's changed. You know,
You save it as.
Yeah, but then you've got 2 files.
Yeah, then you've
Or
got
3 files or 5 files or 10 files, or whatever it is.
I just got the saved one next to the original in the same.
Yeah, but you still got 2 files taking up more disk space. Yeah. So I mean, I know some of my photos might have 3 or 4 different treatments, but I've only got 1 file. And that's really good thing about it. Presets and effects, again, most of these packages have got that preset, so you can apply a preset to a picture or a range of pictures. Say I've got a sunset preset and I want to choose it for all these pictures. I can go all in one click and go bang and do it. All right. Same way when if you, for example, a few weeks ago, I did for a friend of mine, I photographed their son's bar mitzvah. All right. And I did about 40 shots around the tables. All right. And they all needed some adjustment. But what I did was I adjusted the first one, saved that as a preset, and then used that preset to adjust the other 39 all in one click. And it just made the whole thing much easier to control. And the other final thing I think you'll find in most of these packages is masking. And that's something I'm going to come back to a bit later on. But masking is changing month by month as things are going on. As artificial intelligence has increased, you know, when you're going to your develop controls, you tend to be doing a global change to the whole picture. And sometimes you don't want to do a global change to the whole picture. You just want to be able to change part of it. And using masking is exactly the way you can do that. And that's what I'm hoping to demonstrate in the second part of this. Any questions there, or shall I move on? Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Image manipulation packages, I'm really talking about Photoshop and Affinity and Elements to an extent. They are really designed for compositing and design. Most of them will offer layers, so you can build pictures up by adding layers as you go along. And some of them, like Photoshop in particular, have got some really advanced features, like 3D manipulation and so on and so forth. But they don't offer cataloging, and they don't offer the extent of control that the other packages do. So what tends to happen with idiots like me who can't keep their hands away from a computer is you use them in conjunction with each other. So, you know, my main use is to use the Adobe Photographer's package, Lightroom and Photoshop. 90% of the work I do is, no, 80% of the work I do is in Lightroom. And then what I will do is I'll dodge a bit of it out to OM1, I'll dodge another bit out to Luminar, and then I might dodge the whole thing out to Photoshop to do something else, you know, just to do some manipulation. So using them together is the way it tends to be. Right, however, as I say, nearly all the image manipulation packages do include developed tools, and some photographers' packages include image manipulation as well. So I think the classic one really is ON1, which tries to do what Lightroom and Photoshop do in two packages, tries to do it in one package. Not always 100% successful, but on the whole, pretty much. But it's a very, very clever package. Okay, so the packages that are both. Yeah, the photographer's plan I've already mentioned. Luminar Neo does offer you all those things. OM1 does it in the biggest way. Luminar Neo, the cataloging is not very strong, but it's there. But Capture One, again, is one that offers both the photographer's side and the image manipulation one. On the free software, just talking about it very quickly, Windows Photos are very basic. Yeah, you've got some basic adjustments. You can crop, you can rotate. You've got a couple of preset filters, but not very many, but you haven't got a lot of control. Mac Photos, very similar, but it has got a lot more controls for light and color, but it's still obviously a bit limited, and has no well, it has some form of cataloging, but not very much. Basically, it's just using a file explorer or Finder as a catalog. Canon and Nikon, well, considering they're completely free, the Canon one is particularly good if you have a Canon camera. It offers one or two features which are exclusive to Canon, but it is still very basic. It's got very limited cataloging, and it is quite an old-fashioned package now. It's a bit clumsy, but it's quite good. The Nikon one's a little more sophisticated, again, very limited cataloging. And GIMP, as I say, it's a clone of Photoshop. Its real problem is because it's an open source one and anybody can actually go in and work on it, it's got inconsistencies all over the place, and it's very, very difficult to learn. I mean, I've been using Photoshop for years and years and years. I got hold of GIMP, so I thought it was worth a try. And after about 2 hours, I gave up with it because I just couldn't figure out what it was doing. It is very complicated.
On the Nikon one, John, the Nikon NX, can you use that as a plugin?
Not as far as I'm aware.
Okay.
I mean, I have got it. I haven't used it since the day I downloaded it. So I can't tell you the answer.
Yeah.
I don't believe so.
No.
Okay. Right. Okay. So let's just do some comparisons. And I've looked at what I thought the main factors. Does it offer layers? Does it offer cataloging? Is it non-destructive? Does it have developed tools? Are there layers, presets? And how easy, in my opinion, and it is my opinion, nobody else's, is it to use? So you can see that what I've done here. Sorry, I'm just trying to move everybody's pictures out of the way. Right. Okay. Oh, go backwards, John. So yeah, Windows Photos has got some developed tools, got some presets, and bloody easy to use. Pretty much the same with Mac Photos, very easy to use. The Canon and the Nikon ones are more sophisticated. They do have cataloging. They do have some developed tools. The Canon, as I say, because it's a little old-fashioned, it has got some real odd bits in it. The Nikon one is quite easy to use. GIMP, of course, has got virtually everything, but it is incredibly complex and very unstable. Basically, I would say, someone says to you, "I'm using GIMP," I'd look at them with a very sympathetic face, because it is a totally unstable product. So anyway, image manipulation, again, I looked at basically the main features, what I thought of them, and yeah, pretty much okay. So they all pretty much offer everything, apart from, I mean, Elements doesn't have the advanced features that Photoshop and Affinity have got.
I thought Affinity did advertise non-destructive workflow, but
Yeah,
I mean,
you can create an undestructive workflow, but it's not really. All right.
Right.
What you can do is you create, same as Photoshop, you can create an undestructive workflow by creating what's known as smart objects, and you can do a similar sort of thing in Affinity, where you've got the filters which you can apply and reapply and reapply, but a lot of the other factors you can't.
the
It's
only
only
way
certain-
around it, I suppose, is to make a duplicate copy before you kick off.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mm.
So
But as you said before, that's 2 files.
yeah, or if you're a crazy nutter like me, it's 3 or 4 files.
John,
Yeah.
yeah, I use cataloging with Elements, but I thought you said Photoshop could do it.
No,
Catalog.
Photoshop's got no cataloging,
Oh, right.
and Affinity's got no cataloging.
No.
No, Elements has. It's one of the benefits of Elements. But but with Photoshop, the ideal thing is to use it with Lightroom, and Lightroom's got cataloging down
Ah,
to
okay.
a T, you see.
But I thought Photoshop has Bridge, not that I've
Yeah,
ever
but
used it.
yeah, but Bridge is not really cataloging. It's got the same. It's got some of the features. It's an outside package, all right. You can get it free if you want it, but it doesn't keep track of things the way that a real catalog system does. All right. Considering it's free, it's pretty good, but it's again cumbersome and a bit of a long-winded way of achieving things. I'm talking purely about the Photoshop package, purely about the Affinity package, and purely about the Elements package. Yeah. Okay. Right. So let's look at the whoops. Sorry. Yeah. Right. So what can I say to you? I think the only one that actually, or the only, Luminar's got it all, right?
Is that including A1?
Sorry,
A1 Luminar, does that have cataloging?
Luminar AI. No, I'm talking about
Yeah.
Luminar Neo. Luminar AI
you're
is a
talking about
discontinued
Neo.
product.
Okay,
Yeah, Luminar Neo. This is.
Yeah.
It's got it all, and I say its great benefit is it's bloody easy to use. It really is simple. OM1's got everything. It's got a slightly unusual workflow compared to all the other packages on the market, but it's not difficult to use, and it's incredibly clever. DxO is missing the layers side, so you can't really do some of the compositing things that you can do in the others. And it is, again, quite a complicated workflow. Radiant, I don't understand why people would ever want it. It's actually quite limited. Capture One is very complicated, quite expensive. But it only covers the majority of things. And the Adobe Plan, which of course is Lightroom and Photoshop together, pretty well covers everything. And you say I've given it a mark of 4 in terms of ease of use compared to 3.5 to Lightroom, because Photoshop is another learning curve. And let's be honest about it. But it's a question of how far you want to go with it. So,
Can I ask a question on that? Can I ask a finicky question? Why haven't you included Photoshop in this?
because it's not a photographer's package, it's an image manipulation package.
It's a difference.
Oh, I never knew that.
Yeah, that's why I've got up the end here, the Adobe Plan, which is Photoshop and Lightroom together.
It's a basic difference.
Okay.
Yeah, there is a real difference. I mean, the point about it is, you know, if you start doing these twirls and you know, all the multiple layer stacking, which I know you've done quite a bit of that sort of stuff, you can't do that in Lightroom. You can do it in Photoshop. All right, because Photoshop is an image manipulation package, but it doesn't have. It's got Adobe Camera Raw, which is a full set of developed tools identical to Lightroom, but then it doesn't have the cataloging.
Right.
Right. So
Yeah.
does that make sense, Jeanette?
Yeah.
Yeah, fine. Okay. Right. So costs. Right. Let's look at the interesting thing. You can get most of these packages are now going subscription. There are a few which you can buy. Most of the ones you can buy are saying they're going to go subscription over the next 12 months. All right. So even if you bought it, once you bought it, you get no updates. They're trying to get everybody onto the subscription plan. So Lightroom and Photoshop, you can do a plan for each of them for £10 a month. And interestingly enough, you can do a plan for both of them for £10 a month. All right. The difference is that if you do an individual one, you get several gigabytes, or so I think something like a terabyte of cloud space. Whereas if you get the combined one, you only get about 300 or 400 gigabytes of cloud space. But as I tend to keep things on my computer, not on the cloud, I'm not worried about that at all. But £10 a month for me, actually, it's actually less than £10 a month. It gives me everything I want to do. Elements, the rumor is they are discontinuing it at the end of this year. It is a rumor. A lot of people use it. A lot of people love it. But its current price is £87.
John, if they discontinue it, does that mean you can't continue using the one you've already got?
Oh yes, you can carry on using it. They'll be doing no
Right.
more updates, no more new versions.
Right, okay.
No, they won't stop you using it. You can use it non-stop.
Right.
All right, but they just won't be doing any new versions of it,
Okay.
and they won't be doing any support. Probably they'll withdraw support for it at some stage as well. Okay, Neo, their pricing is all over the place at the moment. I mean, they had this ridiculous offer which expired this morning, which I did send to everybody, where you got 2 years for £71. Yeah, which for a subscription package is quite incredible. But that's now changed as of today anyway. So OM1, again, you can buy it as a one-off. The rumor is, again, that will disappear fairly soon. And you can buy it on a subscription. DxO at the moment is the only one that does not offer a subscription of these advanced packages. Capture One is the most expensive one of them all. £24 a month is a lot of money. I think you know, to justify that sort of cost, you need to be a professional photographer. Serif Affinity, well, my gosh, what a value package that is. I mean, it's just a ridiculous price for what it is. How they are going to manage their upgrades, I'm not sure. Serif used to support, up until about 4 years ago, a whole range of other packages, which they sold off at incredibly low prices, like they sell Affinity. And effectively, the company virtually went into liquidation because they just couldn't recoup enough money out of it. But Affinity has been a big success, so maybe they have done. What they're going to do about upgrades and new versions, I don't know. But for the price, it's just a phenomenal value package.
I wondered if they will just create a new package every year or something.
It's the most likely scenario, and they'll charge you for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the most likely scenario. So, but I can't guarantee it.
No.
If anybody's ever interested in Neo or ON1, I do have discount codes for them, which you gets usually a minimum of 10% off, and both of them are doing offers all over the place. So this £71 offer for 2 years, well, in fact, it's 79, but less than 10% brought it down to 71. They will do something similar again in the future. You know, it's one of those things. If you're interested in it, then wait for the offer to come along and get it then. But it's the same with ON1. Now the thing about ON1, which makes it a bit different, is that a lot of the features in it you can also buy as plugins. Right? So if you're using Photoshop, you don't have to buy the full ON1 package. You can just buy the plugin. So their main plugins, they've got ON1 effects, resize, denoise, and one or two others. And you can buy those as plugins just using Photoshop or Lightroom. So you don't have to buy the full package. But again, you could do that on a subscription basis. I see I spelt it subscription, but never mind. I've just noticed that. You'll forgive my bad typing, I hope. So that's it. Okay, so plugins, yeah. Adobe Focus Plan, DxO, Capture One. And actually, I should have included Affinity in here as well. You can buy plugins that will work with those programs. Okay. The packages that tend to work as plugins for things like Photoshop and Lightroom are Neo and ON1. The others have got some plugins, DxO have, but again, there are all sorts of external plugins you can buy. DxO do quite a few, which are odd ones, which you can buy as plugins as well. So, you know, plugins just give you the problem is it all costs money. So what do I suggest? And it is only my suggestion, and I'm looking from my own personal experience, because I sit around and do a lot of things all over the place. I have bought, well, I subscribe to the Photographer's Plan. I subscribe to Neo. I subscribe to ON1. I've got a copy of Affinity. I never use it because it doesn't offer me anything that Photoshop doesn't. So I don't want to go through another learning path, but that's the only reason I don't really use it. But that costs money, but you know, I'm an old fool, what can I say? For me, it gives the best overall results. It's a slightly longer learning path, but you got to cover absolutely everything. If you spend a little time learning how to use it, the cataloging and the control that's available in Lightroom is quite staggeringly good. All right. The only one that actually comes even close to it is ON1, and it does in some cases come very close to it, but it's just got a slightly weird path of achieving things. But the photo plan, in my opinion, is quite brilliant. In terms of results, ON1 is just a genius piece of software. It's only just come out, the latest version. It's got some incredibly clever features built into it. The artificial intelligence levels built in are quite amazingly good, are very fast, but it is a bit odd in some ways it does things, and it's got a bit of a longer learning cycle, but it's very clever. Ease of use, nothing can beat Luminar Neo. It is just so easy to use. It's got some incredibly sophisticated and some very unique features, you know, cutting out backgrounds, doing bokeh effects and things like that. You can do it in Photoshop, you can do it in Affinity, but you can do it 10 times faster and easier in Neo. Some of the erase tools in there. So for example, if you ever get sensor noise, Luminar Neo will just detect all sensor noise and remove it. Okay, it even removes cables and things like that. So if you take I took a picture in Portugal, I think it was, of a cathedral, but there was all wires all over the place from telegraph wires, things like that. One click and they all disappeared. Very clever stuff.
So there's a specific program that says removal of wires or something.
Yeah, it's just a part of that. It just says remove whatever it's called. I think it's cables or what, I can't remember what it says. Yeah, you go into the erase tool and it says, do you want to do a general erase? Do you want to erase sensor spots, or do you want to arrange erase cables? And you just click on it and it does it. Does it do it 100% perfectly every time? No, but it gets 95% of the way there. I mean, this picture of this cathedral, I can't tell you, there were wires all over the bloody place, telephone cables and everything. Just got rid of the lot. And then I had to do a tiny bit of touch up here and there. So it's very sophisticated. Yes, it is a bit slow. There's no doubt about it. For what it costs, what it can achieve, and how fast you can get into it, it's worth putting up the speed. It really is very clever. And the cataloging is definitely limited compared to all the others. Yes, you can catalog, but you can't do quite the same sort of things that you can with the others. So It's not the absolute best for that, but for what it is, it's actually very good.
John,
Yeah.
John, can I ask
Yeah.
a question about Neo?
Yeah.
Yep. I think it must have been about 3 years ago. You came up recommending Luminar and said that they had a special offer and you might have been able to get a discount on that. And I went ahead with it. Then I've hardly used it, but then something else came up where I paid for an upgrade maybe about 2 years ago. Would that be the Neo part?
Well, I don't know. When you started off, does it say Neo? Does it say AI?
I don't know.
If it was 2 years ago, if it was 2 years ago, I doubt it was Neo. I think it only came out last year.
Yeah, it'd be AI, wouldn't it?
No, I think we Luminar AI probably.
Yeah, and
Oh,
there was
right.
one before that as well. The standard Luminar, which I think quite a few of us got.
Yeah, the interesting thing is I've got AI and I've got Luminar Neo, and I still use them both. I use, there are bits in AI which are not in Neo. There are bits in Neo which are not in AI. Yeah, that's just the way I particularly tend to work. But yeah, I mean, the thing about Neo is they are a little expensive for what they are, but on the other hand, it is so easy. I mean, Martin bought it and he was struggling with Lightroom and he was giving up completely with Photoshop. But he said within about 10 minutes of getting Neo, he was actually producing good photos with it. And for me, that's a damn good argument. It really is. Yeah. And for me, this is the best result, which is the photo plan plus the plugins. Yeah, it's going to cost money. I suppose my total budget now is probably around about £25 a month. But for that, I've got everything. I tend to use Lightroom for all my photos, all my cataloging. I use the OM1 plugins. I use the Luminar Neo plugins. I also use the Luminar AI plugins as well, Mike. So I dodge in and out of the packages to actually achieve some of the effects. Some of the effects, I could achieve them all in Photoshop or Lightroom, but the others do it better. And for me, I want the best possible result. I need all the help I can get. It's as simple and straightforward as that. So, yeah. So it is, for me, it's the best result. But yes, it's a more expensive result. I would say for most people, if you're prepared to do a little bit of learning, the Adobe Photo Plan has to be the best solution. All right. Yes, it's more expensive than getting Affinity, but it's going to offer you so much more. So much more. It's just astonishing. So listen, as I said before, if anybody wants to have a Zoom meeting or a one-to-one basis or a group on Lightroom, Photoshop, Neo, OM1, and other plugins, I'm happy to do it with people. All right, because that's what being in the club's all about, is sharing knowledge, isn't it?
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm happy to do that. So any other questions or answers at this stage?
Yeah.
Yeah.
John, with the cataloging, is the Lightroom cataloging much different than the Affinity?
Affinity hasn't got cataloging.
Sorry, not Affinity, Elements.
Yes, it's far more sophisticated.
Oh,
Far more sophisticated. Got so many options in there that it's just astonishing. Yeah. Just hold on one second. Just want to check on one thing here. Don't go away. Yeah, one of the really powerful things I love in Lightroom, which Elements doesn't have, is this virtual copy thing. And I'll show you what that does in a minute, okay?
okay.
Okay, I mean, it's just so handy to play around with photos with virtual copies. It's just a staggering we can do. They've all got unique features. I mean, the interesting thing is HDR, which used to have the most terrible name, because when it first came out, it used to produce the most exaggerated pictures anybody ever seen in their life. but over the last couple of years, it's got more and more sophisticated. You can do HDR in Photoshop, you can do HDR in Lightroom, you can do it in Affinity, you can do it in DxO, but the way that Luminar does it is just astonishingly good. And the interesting thing about it is, whereas most HDR packages require you to have 2, 3 or more images, you know, so you've got a underexposed, an ordinary exposed, and an overexposed picture, and the HDR package will put the 3 together or 5 together, whatever it is, to give you the best result. Luminar can do it with one photo. You can literally take one picture into their HDR, and the changes it makes to it are quite staggeringly good. So that's good. Okay, I'm going to stop the share on that and go over to this Lightroom thing I'm going to show you. Okay, hold on a second. Right, Mike, just to show you this, this is the cataloging side over here on the left. Can you see it all right?
Yes.
Yeah. So these are all my folders where I've got my pictures. All right. Now that's the same as if are you on a Mac or a PC?
Both. I'm going towards the Mac.
Right. Okay. So, you know, this is effectively duplicating your Finder, but just for your pictures. All right. So you never need to use your Finder to find pictures anymore. So, for example, if I open up that one, that's all my pictures from that holiday. Okay.
Yeah.
And those are all folders in my Finder. But if I wanted to move that folder somewhere else, I could literally just drag it around and move it. All right. What I've done, you know, with other images. So, for example, down here, I've got a folder called My Favorite Images, but I've got them as JPEGs, full-size JPEGs, Instagram sizes, and the original files. Right. And it's just a great way of keeping a track of everything. If I look at a picture here, sorry, I'm just going to need to knock that down. If I look at a photo here, okay, you know, I can tell, you know, I've got my ISO, my exposure, the time, the f-stop, the lens I used, everything is available for me all over the place. You know, over here, I can see the size of the image. I can put the name, I can have alternative names, but anything I like with it. So keeping a control through the catalog is just amazingly easy. It really is.
Yeah.
Now, for example, these 5 pictures I put in here are actually here in what is kind of their collections. And all I've done is they're just duplicate images, duplicate in terms of Lightroom, but not actually duplicate files, all right, where I just put down in here so that I can access them easily and know exactly where they are. There's so many ways you can control your images that it's just quite staggeringly good.
John, can I ask?
No.
If I've got to try and think this through. Hold on. If, for example, this picture, you picked from your collections and you did some work on it and you wanted to save it, will it save it automatically everywhere where it is?
No, the point about it,
right.
This is just, forget the collections bit. This is up somewhere in a folder somewhere.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So all it's just doing is the collections is just a way of me saying, I want these pictures put together. All right. So
okay.
That's all it is. It's something I don't use very often, as you can see, because I haven't got many of them. All right. But, you know, for this was ideal. I found 5 pictures I wanted to use to demonstrate something tonight. And I just put them down in a collection because it's easier for me to find them in one place than dodging all over the place to see where they might be. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. So let's just talk about virtual copies for a second. If you look at this image here, okay, I might want to give it several different treatments. And all I can do is I say, create a virtual copy. Okay. And if I go back there, you'll now see I've got 2 versions of it. Right. But if I hover over that one, you can't see any difference, except that one of them is a real file and one isn't. I've still only got one file for this image, but I can now give it 2 totally different treatments. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. Get rid of it. I need one for now. But what I really wanted to do in this part of the thing was to talk a little about using developed tools. And I'm using Lightroom, but you could use ON1, you could use Affinity, you could use Photoshop, Adobe Camera Raw, you could use all sorts of things to do this, but I've just used Lightroom because actually Lightroom seems to do it really, really well. And for me, what I found is when it comes to working on a developed picture, this is the original file, okay, without any adjustments at all. Yeah, you can see down here in the section that everything's in the middle. There's been no adjustments to this original photo, okay? But if I look at this photo, I say, well, what do I want to do with it? All the photos I've chosen, I must tell you, are not great photos, all right? So please don't judge the photo as such. I've chosen them for a specific reason, just to show you something. So if I look at this photo, I'd say the top half of it is quite well lit, a little bit of blowout maybe out here, but the dark here, down the bottom here, it's quite dark. And also take into account what one of our judges said the other night, I think these tree trunks are a bit dark as well. Now, if I start to just change the exposure on this, of course, it's a global adjustment. And of course, it affects everything. And that doesn't really help me. What I really want to do is just work on this bit down here. Okay. I don't know if you can see my cursor all right, can you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Work on that tree trunk and work on that tree trunk. Okay. So in Lightroom, you have the masking. All right. So when you do masking, there's a variety of options, and I'm going to show you all the options. Okay. I'm going to start off by doing what's known as a linear gradient. Okay. And I'm just going to drag it up here like that. And the green just shows the part that's being affected. Where it's dark green, I'm going to get 100%. Up here, I'm going to get 0%. And down there, I'm going to get 50%. Okay. So if I now change the exposure by making it lighter, it's only affecting those areas.
Yeah.
Okay. Bring up the shadows a bit. Okay. So, you know, I've just controlled that thing. I now I can create a new mask here, right? One up here, and I'm going to choose my brush. Okay. And I'm going to brush this tree trunk. And I found with a lot of these things, you don't need to be too precise about it either. All right. And I want to bring up the exposure on those a bit as well, just to make those a bit lighter. So, you know, I've got selective changes. Okay. So if I can actually show you, that's what it was. That's what it is. But all this area of the thing over here has not been affected at all. So it's just the ability to make those selective changes. If I go on to the next picture, I mean, I look at this one, the sky has got a lot more detail than that. These are all raw images, okay? And the great thing about having a raw image is it contains data that would be lost if it was a JPEG. So if I bring down the highlights in this image, you'll see how it affects the sky quite dramatically. Okay, but of course it's affecting everything else. And I don't want to affect everything else. I only want to affect the sky. So if I reset it, go into my thing and choose the sky, right? And it's now masked the sky. I haven't had to do anything apart from click on the word sky. So now I can take the highlights down, right? Bring the whites up a fraction, give it a bit of saturation, perhaps. Where's saturation? There it is. So I can get more blue out of it, a bit of texture, a bit of clarity. Okay, and that's done my sky for me. And of course, hasn't worried the rest of the picture. I want to bring out this building because there's a lot of things in there which are lost in its current thing. So I'm going to create a new mask. I use the brush this time. Make the brush a bit bigger. Hold on. Again, I'm not going to be tremendously precise about this because you don't really need to be, funnily enough. That will do basically. Okay, so again, I'm going to increase the exposure slightly, give it a bit of clarity to bring out some detail in it, a bit of texture, and then turn it on and off, and you can see. And I can turn them both off. That's how the picture was. But you see, in a matter of a few seconds, I've affected the picture, the parts of the picture I really want. I might say, oh, I've got to put a linear gradient at the bottom because I think this is a bit too light here and it's just distracting a bit from it. maybe bring the exposure down a fraction, just to take it a bit away from it. And that's that.
Do you do most of your tutorials online?
Sorry?
Do you do most of your tutorials online, or do you use a book?
Sorry, I don't quite.
Do you your learning procedure with these
On my
packages?
learning procedure, I've done a lot from YouTube. Mainly I've done it by playing around and then sort of searching for other people on YouTube who've done it and find the way they've done it and see if I agree with them or not. And I don't always, funnily enough. This was a classic one with, again, the sky has got a lot more detail in it. But if I bring down the highlights and bring out some details in the sky, of course, it affects the whole picture, and I don't want to do that. So again, I'm going to start off by choosing the sky. Okay, I'll bring down the highlights on it, bring up the saturation a bit on it, because that's what the sky was like. And the problem is, you know, people, the old phrase, the camera never lies. Well, unfortunately, it does, because the camera cannot see what the human eye can. And again, you know, all the shadow detail's gone out of here. But if I start doing the shadow detail, it's going to affect everything else. So the best way is, again, to create a mask. Again, I'll use a brush. Let's make it a bit bigger, do it quicker. Just brush in like that. That will do. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the shadows right up. A bit more exposure. The clarity. All right. So I've achieved what I wanted without affecting the whole picture all the way through. Again, so that's the before, and that's the after. And you can see it's really quite simple to achieve these things. This is a classic one where a camera lies, right? You know, we've all taken pictures where, yeah, the bright sunlight has made something in such deep shadow that you can't see a damn thing when it comes out the other end. So, hey presto, you can do a person one, right? Create a mask for the person, so I can bring the exposure up for the person.
I must say it is much easier. In Affinity, you would have to do this selection tool.
I know, it's a nightmare.
And it's much harder. I agree. This is very easy.
Added elements.
Yeah, I mean, that's the great thing about using a proper photographer's package to do these sort of things. You know, you could do this in OM1, you could do it in DxO, you could do it in Capture One, you could do it in Luminar, you can do it in Lightroom, because they're photographer's packages. And I think now you're beginning to understand what I mean by a photographer's package, yeah?
John, can you not do these things on the neural filters in Photoshop?
Some of them you can, but you've got to remember, a lot of the neural filters, firstly, are in beta version.
Yeah.
Right? And some of them, they don't work very well. And they don't give you a great deal of control. Some of them do, some of them don't. You know, I use neural filters for certain things, but on the whole, I prefer to do it in something like this because I've got more control. I can achieve exactly what I want. Yeah.
Is this package you're using here, though? Is this
Lightroom,
regarded as the development package?
Well, it's it's what I call a photographer's package.
Yeah.
See, the point is, if you've got, you know, you've got Affinity, all right, you've got all the development tools that I'm using here in Affinity, haven't you?
Yeah.
In the developed persona.
Yeah.
But you haven't got the control that you've got here, have you?
It's more problematic. Yeah, I agree.
Exactly. Yeah. This is straightforward, easy. The AI selection is really very clever.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
No, I'm liking what I see.
Yeah. I mean, here's an interesting one. Now, the interesting thing is I'm going to show you this in Lightroom, but as it so happens, Luminar would do this a lot better than Lightroom would. And it's a classic case where I'd say I do a lot of the work in Lightroom or Photoshop, and then I do this last bit in Luminar because Luminar does it better. But I'm going to do it in Lightroom because we're using Lightroom all the way through. And we're going to choose the page which finds the person. Okay. But then I can say, right, the first thing I want to do is I want to work on the face skin, create a mask. And then I come to this custom bit and say, Where is it? Soften skin. Okay. One click.
Yeah.
One click and it's done. I want to make her teeth a bit whiter. So I'm going to choose the person, select the person. Okay. And I'm going to choose teeth. Create a mask. I know she looks great with green teeth, but yeah, just like them. I'm exaggerating a bit because Zoom doesn't actually show you everything quite accurately. Create another new mask. Let's work on her eyes. Where are we? Iris and pupil. Yeah.
This is very similar to AI, Luminar AI. You can do.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's why I say, well, Luminar does it even better than AI.
Yeah.
But I mean, yes, that's the sort of thing. So, just in a few quick clicks, you can achieve that sort of thing. So it's very clever. So, and that was basically all I was going to show you tonight. If there's anything else you want to see or anything you'd like to ask me, please do.
So in comparison to Lightroom and Photoshop,
Yes.
you just get so much more in Photoshop as opposed to Lightroom then, presumably.
No, well, remember, what you see in Lightroom, I mean, all right, so you're using Affinity, right? Affinity 2 using, yeah?
Well, yes, I have used Affinity 2 and I've used.
You're
Luminar.
basically using Affinity 1 at the moment, yeah?
I've had the test for for a month.
Right.
I couldn't see a huge amount of difference, to be honest, between the two.
I don't think there is some differences, without a doubt. A lot of what you're seeing here is in the developed persona of Affinity, right? But what Affinity doesn't have is the AI.
I agree.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's what makes it different. I mean, if I just take another picture at random here, let's have a look. New York, all about New York. Let's find something really stupid in New York. I had a good time in New York. Right, okay. Let's look at that picture. That's the wrong one. That's the one I wanted. Yeah, that was the classic case. And to do that in virtually anything is very difficult. Whereas here it's just such an easy thing. And the classic thing about it is here, if you look at it, it's actually detected other people, as you see. But I want to work on him. Okay, work on the entire person. And it's just so easy. You just say, all right, okay, I'm going to bring him up, bring up the shadows. Okay, maybe a bit of contrast. All right. And it's the AI that makes it very, very simple.
Yeah. No, it's very impressive, I must say.
Yeah. And if we work on, let's have a look here. Right. Not a great photo, never mind. But again, if I go into the masking here, I choose the people. You see, it's actually found all 4 people. And I can actually do individual adjustments to each of the individual people without affecting the whole bloody picture, which is a great way of doing it. So that's that's for me, the AI that's in Lightroom is very similar to the AI that's in ON1, similar to the AI that's in Luminar Neo, but it so happens I think that Lightroom does it better. Okay, so I tend to do these sort of things in Lightroom just because it's faster and easier. And again, with a lot of these pictures, if I go back to my grid, go back to the New York one for a second. Where's New York? I can't spell anymore. There it is. Right. So these are all the same picture, but they're virtual copies. So I've only got one file, and I've just done slightly different things with them. So I've still only got one file, but each of them's got its own editing. All right, and because the editing is kept separate from the file, my original file is completely intact. And I've got some other examples of that before down here later on as well, where I've taken one picture and taken multiple versions of it, just to get you see, they're just virtual copies, which I've done different effects to.
John,
Yeah,
this one you've gotten as an example, there are 5 pictures, 1, 2, is it 5 pictures or 4 pictures very similar? Oh no,
most,
no, you had it before where one was, or a couple were black and white.
yeah.
Oh, okay, well, anyone like that where you've got a color and a black and white,
Yeah,
where you've done odd
different things.
changes.
Yeah.
If you wanted to print from one of those, would you just sort of right click and print? How does it work?
What you do is, remember, what you've got here in a photographer's package is the original file unaltered, plus another file with all the changes to it. Okay,
Yeah,
so what you then do, if I wanted to print that one, I'd right click and go export.
Yeah.
And I'd export as a JPEG. All right.
yeah, it's got to be converted to a JPEG.
Well, it doesn't have to be converted to a JPEG.
No, I mean to print.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Most printers will want you to have a JPEG, but you can convert it to a TIFF or a JPEG or a DNG
Right.
or a PNG or whatever you like.
Can you
Right.
resize in Lightroom?
You can, but it's not brilliant at it. Same as Photoshop isn't brilliant at it, and Affinity isn't brilliant at it.
No, it isn't.
Right? Yeah.
It doesn't hold the size you require sometimes. You know, it doesn't, you might put the dimensions in that you want, but it can try and change it.
Well, no, you can change what you like. I mean, for example, here, if I go to the crop tool, all right, I can choose my dimensions. So if I want it A4 size, all right, and then I can crop accordingly. All right, that's A4 size. I've got 14 by 8s, I've got 4 by 3s, 16 by 9s, 16 by 10, 5 by 7s. You create the size whatever you like, or you can actually put an exact size in terms of pixels or whatever you like to create the size you want.
Mm.
Okay, and then when I export it, so if I crop that one down and I click on export, all right, I export it to a file. I won't bother to do it. I'm going to make it a JPEG. Okay, I'm going to resize it, and I want the longest edge to be 2400 pixels, and I want it to be at 300 pixels per inch. Okay. And there's your picture to size.
Mm.
Make sense? Oh, quality. It's a bit low. Let's put the quality up. And then you export it, which I'm not going to bother to do at this stage, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah. But if you're going to make something a lot bigger, I mean, this, yeah, you could do that in Photoshop. You can do that in Affinity. I think Affinity makes it quite complicated to do it, but you can. But if you had a very, very small picture, I mean, the classic situation, let me find a particular picture I know that I've done this with. It's some way down. Hold on. That's the picture I want. Okay, that is a tiny part of a whole image. All right, it's not very big at all.
Clownfish.
Sorry?
It's
Yeah,
called a
yeah.
clownfish.
Yeah. Well, I called it Finding Nemo.
Isn't
But that is just a highly cropped part of an original picture. But to resize it up and not lose the detail, you can see the detail in here is quite dramatically good still. I think by the time I'd finished cropping it down, it was only about 300 pixels wide. And if I tried to resize that up to a decent size in Photoshop, it would look appalling. So I use the ON1 extension called ON1 Resize, which is brilliant. And it resized it up to an A4 picture for me, and lost no detail. In fact, even added a bit of detail. Very quickly. Let me just stop this share.
And you save them all as TIFFs.
No, I save them usually as JPEGs.
Oh,
Yeah.
but that was a TIFF, that one.
That one might have been, yeah, but I mean, generally, if I'm going to send them out to print, I save them as TIFFs, as JPEGs. Hold on. Bum. What was I just going to show you? I've forgotten. Sorry, I can't see my own screen here.
Was it to do with resizing or anything?
No, it wasn't to do with that. Oh, I know what I was going to show you. This picture here. This was one of Bruce's. Sorry, it's being a bit slow because I've now got about five packages open. Yeah. When he took this picture, his focus was on the balloon. All right.
Huh. That's what Resize did to it.
Wow.
I mean, that's astonishing, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I can't tell you what the original was like. It was virtually, you couldn't really see her face at all. And that was actually done in Neo. Photoshop couldn't do that. Lightroom couldn't do it. ON1 couldn't do it. Neo did.
Yeah.
It's staggering how that did that. And again, if you take, here's an interesting one. This is one of my shots of
Yeah, sure.
That was your 20.
Yes.
Yeah, right. I don't think it was actually this one. It was one of the other ones. I don't know. It might have been. But if I put this just one picture into the HDR merge and click on merge, it will take a few seconds to do it. That's how it came out. Yeah, I mean, could anything be easier than that?
That's in Neo.
That's in Neo, yeah.
Yeah.
That was the original.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And that was the HDR version of it. Yeah, it's taking a bit of time to render. I think it's because I've got Photoshop open, Lightroom open, Neo open, and of course Zoom open. So, but even so, that's, you know, considering that was one click, that's a pretty impressive performance. Yeah. So sometimes when I've got a really bad photo, what I might do is take it into Neo first, put it through this HDR merge as a single photo, and then book it into Lightroom at that point, and then start working around on all the finer details. And that's why I say I chop and change between them. But you know, if you were say to me you could only use one package, what would it be? For me, it would be the Adobe Photographer's Plan, because it gives me the biggest number of options and the biggest amount of control. So that's it, folks.
Good.
No, really interesting,
That's
John.
really interesting.
Yeah. Thank you very much indeed.
Yes.
Right.
thank you.